What do you think the appeal is of this character who's now gone on for over 60 years?
I mean, I think like a lot of you guys, like kids love dinosaurs, or at least good kids love dinosaurs. And so to have a dinosaur that has I mean, sorry, I don't want to label Godzilla as a dinosaur because that's inappropriate, but dinosaur-esque creature, and I think culturally, like, mankind has had an obsession with monsters since the dawn of time. So to have one that we can sort of befriend in a weird way, just goes a long way. Like, it just resonates deeply, like on a cultural level.
Besides the 1954 Toho Godzilla movie, which everybody considers a classic and the best in the series, what are some of your other favorites of the Toho Kaiju movies?
Oh God, there's so many. I have to admit, I know it's a bit of an underdog, but I do have a soft spot for Godzilla versus Hedorah, or Godzilla versus the Smog Monster. Specifically because it scared the living shit out of me as a kid. Because the Smog Monster would just fly over and just turn people to skeletons. And so like that gave me nightmares. Mechagodzilla, that was another good one, because it was the first time I really felt like Godzilla was up against the ropes. And then Mothra's solo film and Rodan's solo film. Yeah.
So when you were first hired to make this movie by the Legendary Pictures, Godzilla King of the Monsters, what kind of marching orders did they give you? Did they ask you to come in to pitch your idea for the film, or how did that play out?
Yeah, what happened was I had a dinner with Alex Garcia, one of the Legendary execs, and he sort of quietly told me that Gareth wasn't going to be returning because he was still finishing Rogue One. And so he asked me, do you have any interest in Godzilla? And I think before he could finish the question, I said yes, with like a firm hand slap on the table. And there weren't marching orders, but obviously they had already been building a universe with the 2014 film, and they were in post-production on Skull Island, so they wanted to continue building that out. So they strongly suggested incorporating Monarch, which I love, because I love the idea of a government agency that hunts down the supernatural and monsters, because if there was a government agency, I would drop everything to go work for them, like immediately, if you guys are listening. And then they asked, would you be into including Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, which just brought tears to my eyes. So it was like there were more questions, and it was all a lot of very eager enthusiasm.
When you were writing the screenplay, what did you want to bring? What fresh spin did you want to bring to these characters, or retain from the Toho films?
Well, something I thought the Toho films did really well that I hadn't seen in Gareth's film. I loved Gareth's film, but it was sort of a pure science fiction disaster movie. And something I loved from the original Toho movies, going back to the original 54 film, and then you also saw it in Mothra, was the notion that these creatures were gods. They were ancient gods. They were worshipped. And I love the idea that these creatures were the reason we have legends about dragons and Leviathan and giants. And so to bring that sort of mythological element was something that I hadn't really seen done in a modern giant monster film. A lot of the 50s atomic monster movies, again, they were just strict science fiction. It was always like, oh, atomic testing in the desert created this giant insect, and it's now rampaging, but I never saw something that resonated much deeper than that. So to really comb through old myths and legends and Dungeons and Dragons books and try and find a way to connect the two was something I was really adamant about. I feel like as monster lovers, we also appreciate being teased by the lack of monsters. Like the first Alien film, the first Jaws film, a lot of the tension, a lot of the suspense was not knowing where it was, not always seeing the creature. And I feel like that's a lost art form. So I really appreciated and respected Gareth for taking that bold approach. That said, since he had done that, I said, fuck it, let's just lay on the monsters. Because I like both, I love, like, my favorite movie of all time is Aliens. I love the second film, but I love the first film too. So it's like, you can appreciate less is more, but I can also appreciate more is more. Yeah, so we went more is more.
So what can you tell us about the storyline?
Nothing. I can. It picks up 5 years after the original film, and it really centers on it's just our world realizing, oh shit, we live in a world full of giant monsters. How are we going to survive? How are we going to adapt? Should we kill these things? And there's sort of a debate going on about whether we should exterminate any titans that we find, or whether or not we can coexist with them. With Godzilla being the key to that coexistence potentially. And so people like Ken Watanabe's character, Serizawa from the previous film, firmly believe that these creatures play a vital role in our ecosystem, and that killing them could potentially make things worse. So for instance, let's say we had succeeded in killing Godzilla in 1954 when they first discovered him. Had we done that, the Butos wouldn't have been defeated. You know, we would have killed our best shot at survival. So it's kind of a lion and the mouse concept that's being put forth, you know, with us being the mouse. So that if we're going to survive, we need to befriend the lion that is Godzilla. And then the human side of the story is really about Vera Farmiga, Kyle Chandler, and Millie Bobby Brown playing this fractured family that survived the previous film. But because they survived, they've fallen apart as a result. And both Kyle Chandler and Vera Farmiga are scientists who have some experience with these creatures.
So much of this movie is created in the computer, unlike, say, Trick or Treat, where it's all practical.
It's all practical.
Explain the challenges as a director, that kind of commitment to making a film and working in that manner.
I mean, I love practical, but obviously that's kind of impossible given the nature of these creatures. I mean, yeah, we could go old school and go man in suit. As much as I would love to do that, I don't think doing that version would be fun. Yeah, so we obviously had to use computers to create these characters, but in a lot of ways it was kind of like going home again, because I started as an animator. So before I got into practical creatures, I was doing like old school hand-drawn animation, and then got into computer animation. So in a lot of ways I was incorporating a lot of the same skill sets that I did when I was an animator. But it was a blast. I mean, like, even though I couldn't have creatures on set, I did everything I could to make it feel like they were there. The biggest thing I did was to play the creatures' roars while we were shooting scenes. And so I had giant speakers kind of like these set up around the sound stages, and then my sound guys gave me an iPad full of like Rodan screeches and Mothra screeches and Godzilla's classic roar. And so we would start the day with Godzilla's classic roar. You know, like as soon as you're ready to shoot, just hit Godzilla's roar, just so the cast and crew knew he was here in spirit. And then whenever there were scenes like that one where they're running in terror from tennis balls and laser pointers, I would at least play the roars so it would put a little extra spring in their step, and it worked. So I was like a DJ in the booth in the back, you know, like playing the roars. But it actually improved the actors' performances. You know, their eyes got a little bit wider, they'd run a little bit faster. I think because we still have sort of like a genetic memory from when we were monkeys running from, you know, predators in the wild. But it was a lot of fun.
You folks have some questions for Michael? All right, yeah, right here in the front.
First question, wow.
The Trick or Treat
merciless. Well, I'll tell you what, if you guys take 4 friends to opening weekend of Godzilla King of the Monsters, it's going to make it a lot easier for me to get a Trick or Treat sequel going. So, and I mean take like 4 non-monster fans to the movie.
In regards to the score that you're choosing, the music you're choosing for the trailers, what made you decide to use these specific music, like Claire de Lune, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and whatnot? And when do you think we might hear some of Bear's score?
Really good question. The musical choices honestly were the marketing department. They're the ones really steering the ship. I mean, I had no objections to it because I've also said I feel like this is a monster opera. If Star Wars was space opera, this is monster opera. And I mean, I think they go together like peanut butter and jelly. Yeah. But also, if you watch a lot of the old Godzilla films, I mean, they're filled with beautiful music. Really orchestral, operatic music. And that was an inspiration to me and to Bear McCreary, my composer, as to when you'll hear bits of his score. I think we're releasing the soundtrack album a couple weeks before the film comes out. We might be dropping a track or two in the next couple weeks.
the soundtrack sample any of the Toho music?
Yes.
All right.
That was a deal breaker. Yeah.
The Mothra theme.
Like, what's Godzilla without his theme? You know?
I love the Mothra theme too.
Mothra's theme will be in there.
All right.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, question from this side. Yeah. Discuss the building of the MonsterVerse with Godzilla and the creative process. The genesis.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because the Toho movies really helped pioneer the idea of the cinematic universe. You know, the Universal monsters were sort of the pioneers. They definitely started it, but then Toho grabbed the concept and ran with it long before Marvel did. So, and so I feel like we're sort of carrying on that tradition, the idea of building a monsterverse, and it's fun. You know, the idea that you could build a universe full of giant monsters, it's too irresistible. I mean. And then Legendary had sort of already laid the foundation for that because, again, they had Gareth's film and Skull Island, which also started to tie those things together. So this just sort of felt like a natural evolution. But at the same time, there weren't any sort of mandates from the studio. I enjoyed it. So, of course, we're going to mention Kong and Skull Island and just sort of, you know, sprinkle some breadcrumbs to follow. I love Biollante. I love Biollante. Yeah, I used to have Venus flytraps as pets, so I mean, yeah, that's a no-brainer. I would love to. It's just all, again, if you take 4, 5, 10 friends to opening weekend, then it makes these requests a lot easier.
Is there any Christian symbolism with Ghidorah coming out?
Whatsoever. None. What cross? Yeah. No, yeah, the symbolism is God good, Ghidorah bad. But no, honestly, we went biblical. The idea was to go biblical. And I survived 12 years of Catholic school, so that really messed me up in all the right ways. And so, I mean, I remember watching, The Omen, and then my dad saying, you know all that stuff's real. I'm like, excuse me? You know? And so then he goes, yeah, read Revelation, the last book of the Bible. And went home and just poured through it, and all these like prophecies about dragons rising from the pit with multi-heads and multi-horns. You can't help but draw a comparison. So yes.
My dad shaved my head looking for the 3 6s when I saw it.
And found them, I'm sure. I have 6'5", I didn't quite make it. Yeah.
How about a question from this side? How involved was Toho, and what was the experience like, and more or less than the last one?
Well, Toho is one of our creative partners, so they're involved, and they had final approval on the designs for the creatures. So I had a very surreal moment where I had to take our designs, which were still in progress, fly to Tokyo, and present them to the entire Toho board, which sounds just as scary as it was. They're wonderful, wonderful collaborators, great partners, but it was intimidating because it sort of felt like full circle. You know, here was the company that was responsible for creating so many movies and characters that we love, and I felt like the kid who heard that echo, heard that call, bringing it back to them and saying, well, here's my version of the monsters you created. And so it was very emotional, but they've been nothing but supportive and just wonderful. But the Oxygen Destroyer is in the film, and it's not just a cameo, it plays a very legit role in the movie. It's a plot point.
What Kaiju would you give its own movie, maybe?
Its own movie or like a cameo in another?
Okay.
I mean, I love Biollante. I love Biollante because it's one of the few female Kaiju. It's also terrifying. But I also have a soft spot for Gigan. Because he came so close to killing Godzilla. Yeah.
What was it like working with Billy Bobby Brown from
She's
Stranger
great,
Things?
honestly. She's an old soul. So she looks like she's 13 years old, but yeah, she's like an old wise wizard on the inside. Yeah.
Are we ever going to see Mecha Godzilla?
Not in this movie. Maybe down the road, you never know. I mean, I won't even bother saying it again, but you know what I'm going to say.
If Toho called you up to go make a Godzilla movie, would
Yes.
you say they gave you the keys and said you could pick any movie you would want to make, any Kaiju, what would you pick? Obviously, it sounds like you want to Biollante Kaiju, but
I might go a little obscure and pick War of the Gargantuas. Because that movie also messed me up as a kid. Like, that was a scary one. And they're not that well known, so you could have some freedom with them.
What went into adapting King Ghidorah for this movie? And if you have a favorite King Ghidorah movie?
What went into adapting? I mean, obviously the design was a huge thing. But again, Toho had very strict mandates. You know, that we would never get away with doing purple King Ghidorah. You know, so like there were. I wish I still had it on me, but there was like a list of the traits that King Ghidorah had to have according to Toho, which were the 2 tails, 3 heads, forked tongue, golden scales. From there, it was sort of up to us. But what I did was try to make it the most realistic dragon possible. And so we studied a lot of nature and looked at king cobras, Komodo dragons, different kinds of reptiles, because lo and behold, it turns out there's a lot of golden, yellow reptiles out there. We recorded different reptiles and animals for his sounds, tried to make his trill as close to the original as possible, and then also created 3 personalities for each head, which some of you guys might have heard about by now. And I think the motion capture actors are here.
Yeah, that we did yesterday.
Yesterday? Yeah, so I took 3 motion capture actors and we did performance capture for a day or 2 and had them act against each other. And so the three actors who played the separate heads were sort of tied to each other. And so each head would have a slightly different reaction to Godzilla's presence. But it was a lot of fun. As far as like my favorite Ghidorah, it's the original.
What was your biggest Godzilla fanzilla moment on the set?
Oh man. I don't. Oh, I can tell you a really eerie one. All right, this is weird. So it was early August. We were shooting a scene in this underwater base. It's like Monarch's main headquarters, right? And part of the set deck that I really insisted that we have was sort of a memorial wall on in one of the hallways. And on this memorial wall, it was sort of a tribute to all the fallen Monarch agents and soldiers. Sort of like, you know, the Vietnam Memorial Wall, the CIA has one dedicated to people who have fallen in the line of duty. And so we filled it with the names of different characters from Godzilla lore, you know, going all the way back to the original one, as well as certain other notable names and crew members and whatnot. And we put the memorial wall up, and then we were shooting, and then the next day we got wind that the original actor who portrayed Godzilla had passed away, Nakajima. And I forgot, but his name was on the wall. So like 2 days after we put the wall up, he had passed away. And so we were shooting scenes with that wall in the background on the day that he had unfortunately passed. So it was a very touching moment. We also, we put a tribute, we had a moment of silence on set for him, and then had one of our camera crew create this original beautiful piece of artwork and we projected it up on the wall as a tribute to him. So it was a very solemn but touching moment, and to be shooting a Godzilla film when the original actor had just passed away.
Will the Mothra fairies be in the movie?
Maybe.
Okay, here on my right, okay, on the end.
A very strong maybe.
Very strong maybe, okay. Okay, go ahead. Is there another kaiju in this movie?
Other than... Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Not other Toho licensed creatures, but some original new ones, yeah. Yeah, we've expanded the ecosystem a little bit.
Any inspiration from the Gamera trilogy?
Not knowingly, no. I like Gamera, but not as much as Godzilla. So I haven't really followed it as much, I have to be honest.
Talk about the redesign of the awesome Rodan.
I mean, I love Rodan. I've had a soft spot for him for a long time. My holy grail as a kid was to get the Shogun Warriors Rodan. And it was like the one thing I would have on my Christmas list year after year, and I would never get it for Christmas. So I was always heartbroken. And into adulthood, I would have dreams about getting the Rodan Shogun Warriors figure. And so when we were greenlit, I finally tracked one down off eBay and got it. But since I loved him so much, I really wanted to make him as cool as possible. And what I talked about doing was looking at it from a biological point of view. Like, okay, what makes Rodan awesome is that he apparently can survive and hibernate inside of a fucking volcano. So we looked at volcanic rock. We tried to find ways to visually depict that Rodan could survive and adapt to living inside of a volcano. And so that's why he is that sort of burgundy red color. And then we added the idea that he almost has magma flowing through his veins. And then mythologically try to tie him back to the idea of the Phoenix. Not the X-Men Phoenix. The idea that, the Phoenix that rises from the ashes. Yeah, so in the original Rodan, I imagine that some of you have seen that. There's actually two of them. That's a twist. That there's two of them and they're mating. And so they're sort of nesting inside of this volcano. And there's a very bittersweet ending where they die trying to save each other, essentially. I like the idea that this was an egg that they left behind. Don't quote me and say that's canon or whatever. It's just sort of a neat idea.
Kaiju sex.
Okay.
Okay, how many monster rejections did you get from Toho? And what will you be doing on May 31st?
Oh, no rejections from Toho at all. They gave suggestions and ideas, but there weren't any rejections from them. And on May 31st, I'm going to be on vacation.
Okay, we got time for 2 more questions, so let's make them good ones, okay? In the middle here, are you planning on doing any new books on your art?
My art? Not for my personal art, no. Except this piece. There will be an art book about this movie, yes, but not my personal art, no.
Give me one more killer Godzilla question. Okay, what is the biggest challenge making a film of this epic size? What is it?
I think the one thing that no one ever prepares you for in film school or anything is sort of the emotional roller coaster of it. There's a lot of schools and lectures and YouTube videos or whatever, and books about the technical side of it. But there's nothing that ever teaches you about the ups and downs and the emotional upheaval of making something that you love. Because when you love it, you care about it that much more and you want to protect it and do it right. I didn't do this for a paycheck. And so as a result, the ups and downs were much rockier than anybody could have told me. But my love for the character and the series kept me going.
So where are you folks going to be on May 31st?
What are you going to do? I think I heard it. All right, that's good enough.
All right, let's give it up for Michael Dougherty, Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.